So welcome everybody today. I am very lucky to be joined by Paul Wiseman of Bannermans Lawyers and Leanne Habib from Premium Strata. And we're talking about the New South Wales legislative changes, what have already come and then what's more to come. And really that's a chance to update all of our lot owners and committees about their obligations and responsibilities. So welcome Paul and Leanne. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Sam.
So there's been a bit of change this year, right? In fact, there's been a bit of a flurry. And so consequently, there's more obviously to come in terms of responsibilities of lot owners, committees, strata managers and building management. What does that mean for committees, Paul, in terms of what they should be aware of with those changes?
I mean, there's enough to fill several hours worth of presentations, but I thought I'd start by sort of touching on the most recent changes and then working back a bit. So one of the big changes that's come in as of 1st of April relates to your capital works fund plan for your strata scheme or your scheme generally. And so this ties in with basically Fair Trading has issued a prescribed document now, so there's a mandatory format in terms of content that now needs to be included and touched on. It won't bear on your current plan, but as soon as you amend or have to adopt a new one, you'll have to adopt the new form for that. So I think one of the big things to note for capital works fund plans is the whole idea behind them is to let you front load your big expenses by putting aside a small amount year on year so that when a big expense comes, you're actually prepared for it. But obviously it's academic when you start. So it might say, we're going to replace our carpet every 6 years, but you get to your 6th year, it's still looking pretty good. You don't have to spend the money at that point in time if you don't need to. But the whole idea is you're meant to be considering it at each of your annual general meetings, looking at what's coming up and looking at whether or not that still broadly aligns with what you expect. And if it doesn't, that's the point in time where you should be amending it with the idea that you project out or bring forward as is necessary the particular expenses. So the whole idea is this is just a bit more prescriptive in terms of content. But the whole idea is it's just meant to be a bit more accurate. That's the theory anyway, so we'll see how that plans out.
Well, I think that's important because we have seen some maintenance plans where they say replace the roof and there's no roof. So I'm a big advocate of making 100%. Sure that it reflects what's actually happening in the building, right?
Yeah, you get these cookie cutter ones that are just, here's my shopping list of things that any strata scheme might have. It doesn't mean that yours does.
So a tip is to ensure the consultants are going to your building when they are preparing these forecasts rather than just dashing it out from the keyboard.
Yeah.
And that does mean you're going to pay more than $1,000 cookie cutter approach, right? But this is your most expensive asset, right? Yes. So, if you're building $70 million, you can afford to spend more than $1,000 to get your maintenance plan correct.
Yeah, exactly. And it's saving you on the long run from that last minute, oh dear, we've got $2 million we now need to find from somewhere, because you're like, well, I've been putting aside $100K per year for the last how
and
long.
You just don't want it just to be ticking a box. Yes, I got the forecast, I tick the box. You want the forecast to be beneficial, that you can really use it as a good guide for your budgeting. So as you said, Paul, it doesn't come in a year's time where you need $2 million and you've got to find $2 million. So
exactly.
It's important.
Yep.
So what else has been happening legislative-wise?
Yes. So the next one that ties in with that is in relation to new strata schemes only, but where you're in a multi-story building, so that's one with at least one unit above the other unit, so not your townhouse necessarily a class 1 building, developers now need to have a bit more due diligence when they're preparing that initial maintenance schedule and the budget that accompanies it. And that is also a prescribed form now, but it's also a requirement now that for those types of builds, it needs to be signed off by a suitably qualified consultant. In this case, it's most likely a QS. So the whole idea is it's not uncommon to find out when you buy into a new scheme that your wonderfully low budgeted levies are woefully inadequate for the purposes. So the whole idea behind this is that they should be more accurate, and there's sting in the tail for a developer if it isn't.
That's really awesome, because we often see levies double, right, from year 1 to year 2, and people who are moving in who are on a set income, so that's pensioners, really gets a nasty shock when they see that, and it does force some of them to move out. So we don't want to see that happening.
Yeah, and it's not just an increase that they're going to be faced with after year one, but they're also left with a deficit, which is an added expense that they're going to have to raise additional funds to cover. So it is important to get the expenses and the budget right from the outset. So I supported and was very big on that change. I thought it was a very good positive change.
Agreed. Yeah, an excellent change. Yeah. Excellent change. And then the last one to kick in with the first or the 1 April changes is in relation to embedded networks. So your Strata information certificate, your 184, that you get when you come in with a new purchase, now has additional requirements to specify any embedded networks that are tied to your particular Strata scheme. It's just basically a forewarning that you've got, I wouldn't say limited options, because you can always branch out from an embedded network supplier specifically. That's baked into the legislation, but it's just letting you know that there's a bit more of a monopoly that you're navigating in that circumstance. Yep.
And I think that's
talking
good
about
too.
embedded. Sorry, Sam, I was going to say, talking about the embedded network as well, the vendor now must disclose the embedded networks in their sale contracts. And if they fail to do that, then it allows a purchaser to rescind the contract. So they're going really hard on embedded networks, which I think is good, because it's been a space for a very long time that I think,
it's a bit more of a stitch up.
Consumers have been stuck with them.
For a 20-year term sometimes,
exactly.
right? And that's
thing
longer than a marriage or a jail sentence. So, come on.
that has been wound back as well, actually. Yeah. So the changes that kicked in for mid to late last year have removed an exclusion. So there was a restriction of maximum 3 years on certain supply agreements. That's now been expanded to expressly note that it applies to embedded networks, which had previously been carved out. There was a previous section or subsection 4 that excluded embedded, no longer there. So you're looking at a 3-year term, and for any agreements that were in existence before that amendment came in, maximum hard cap of 10 years. So it avoids those 20-year stitch-ups that we do see from time to time.
And listen, if you're happy with your embedded network provider, that means that you'll just renew the contract and continue on with them. If you're not, it gives you the option to change your supplier, right? So that's the good news.
Yeah, and rates change quite often, so it's really good to test the market. And 3 years is reasonable. 20 years is just too long. And, I think 3 years works really
good. Yeah. So what about the intrusive inspection as well, Paul? Because that's kind of like come into play this year. And of course, there was a prior requirement where, if the committee was aware of defects, they were legislatively required to actually fix them. Now that if there's actually resistance, and we have seen that, unfortunately, fair trading can step in, correct? If that's been reported to them.
There's a whole suite of empowering given to the secretary to allow them to investigate 106 complaints. So now you're not limited to just bringing it up with your scheme, and if not, going to the tribunal. You now have an avenue to go to fair trading and get them to be involved if they choose to. It's an absolute discretion on their part whether they do, but if they do, they have very broad powers to go in, gain access, request documents and information, and even go so far as to arrange contractors to do relevant invasive inspections to determine the nature or extent of any defect that needs to be addressed, and then to specify a scope of works and get an enforceable undertaking from the owners corporation to do it. Obviously, with baked-in review and protection mechanisms along the way if you want to dispute a finding, but it's a very big. It's almost your civil law sort of, the judge that's more proactive in investigating proceedings. You've got a fair trading government body that's going to take in and have that independent investigative role. I haven't heard too much in terms of it being exercised yet, but Sam, I don't know if you've heard any yet, but it's definitely something that will probably come up more and more.
And they're definitely focused on obligations under Section 106, because one of the other changes that came through last year, around about July, was that a owner now can sue for damages up to 6 years, whereas previously it was a 2-year limitation, whereas now it's a 6-year limitation, which means owners corporations really have to mitigate that risk and any potential claim by attending to their obligations under 106. So the days of, we don't have the money, let's defer it, I think are long gone. They've really left very little reason for an owners corporation to defer its obligations for Section 106. And they've pretty much said if it's safety impacting the use of the lot of a common property, you can't defer it. And that's leaving very little reason, in my view, to be able to defer those works. So I think it's important that owners corporations understand those obligations. In addition, you'd rather be in control of the rectification process than having, you know, the secretary, the property commissioner or fair trading step in and control that process for you, because they've almost mirrored the the powers of the building commissioner to now the Strata property commissioner, where they can go in and issue rectification orders. So my advice is plan early, which prevents replacement, but where you have to do works, let's do it rather than deferring, because it'll just cost more money.
Yeah, take it seriously.
Well, and if you were the one that was having a leaking window and mold in your room, would you want something dealt with it? You know, like we have to be very conscientious that we're a community living in the apartment, right? And we would want to be diligent with the safety and well-being of all residents, not just the ones who have the power on the committee.
And I find, like, if your owners corporation takes it seriously, even if it's something that's complex and takes a while, if you're genuinely engaged in the process and you're not getting, stonewalled or brushed off, goodwill exists. They will give you a bit more grace if a complication arises. They're not going to fly off to the tribunal or escalate unnecessarily, because they take on board that you're taking it on board, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they only ever escalate when frustrations kick in, and frustrations kick in when there's no action. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
And of course, invariably what happens is if it goes that far, it will get into the media at some point. So, best way to actually deal with it is be proactive, neighbourly, and don't have the building commission or the fair trading come knocking on your door.
100%.
Really, let's not go that far.
Yeah.
So obviously there's greater disclosures now, Leanne, with regards to strata managers and building managers. So when we're at a committee meeting or an AGM and the committee is looking at things, what do they need to be aware of, and also the owners?
In terms of disclosures, I mean, the disclosures I think are quite thorough. The disclosures are ensuring that, managing agents are disclosing any connection with any party, including suppliers, as well as original owners and developers. And I think that's really important. So that way owners are well informed when they are making decisions regarding appointment of a managing agent or entering into, contracts with suppliers, including insurance renewal. Owners are well aware of the facts before they make that decision. So these disclosures, I think, are giving greater transparency. They're very detailed, and, they're quite repetitive in terms of who you connected with, how you connected with them, what are you receiving in relation to any, payment because of that service, in terms of like insurance commissions. And, some strata agents do have affiliation with service providers, so it's important that they're making that disclosure. I'm still a big believer that I think the legislation needs to go a little bit further, and I think they need to limit delegated authority where there's a conflict. So for a managing agent, if they have, a cleaning company or, a fire company or a plumbing company, they should not be authorised to issue work orders to that company where they have a conflict. I still think that legislation should look at that and restrict any delegated functions where there is a conflict. And Sam, I think these disclosures are really helping owners become more aware, more informed, so they can actually make that well-informed decision.
Yeah, it's all about transparency, and that's like there's a record, and there should be a document recording it, and they exercise a delegated function. To be honest, I agree. I think that's it. Just if you don't have oversight of it, there's always a risk, and that's what they're trying to mitigate with it. They've gone one step, I guess, along the path by requiring that notice to be given before entering into the contract. So at least there's something there. But I agree, it's not necessary. Like I think it's a situation where just avoid that potential conflict.
And the disclosure for me doesn't give you the authority to make the decision. The fact that you disclosed it shouldn't then lead you to make that decision.
Yeah, it's like developers shouldn't be voting on defects, right? If you have a disclosure, you shouldn't be involved, right?
Correct.
And conflict of interest for me is one of those kinds of terms that make me shudder, just like the words performance solutions, right? So and so I do though recommend. So Leanne, you put yours right at the front of your AGM, and you actually make sure that your committee and also your owners are aware of it, and that they accept that they're aware of it. So from my perspective, like, if you don't see something in the beginning of your AGM, I think the committee and also the owners should be asking the strata manager, do you have any conflicts to declare? Correct?
Absolutely. And I really hate when I see them as appendix, 4 or 5 of the agenda.
300-page
think
agenda.
They should be and then you're getting 100 pages of appendixes. That makes it a lot more harder for owners to navigate and find the information.
Yeah.
So my view is, if you're going to make the disclosure, which you have to, and you're going to be transparent because you need to and must, do it properly. Don't do it in the fine print. Don't do it on page 50 of a 100-page document. So as you said, Sam, if you're not seeing it in the motions, ask for it. If you can't see it in the appendixes as well, ask for it, because they must make those disclosures, as I said, very high level about connected parties, relationships, and any payment that they're actually receiving. So I think definitely look out for that. And in terms of disclosures, that's what I would be advising. And it's no different
in the case
to
of buyer beware.
And
it's
I
a
say
buyer
this so many
beware
times.
situation.
Absolutely. And I say so many times, a real estate agent, they're selling you the house, but they're not making the decision to buy the house. That's ultimately your decision. So same thing with the conflict. They can offer the services, they can sell the services, they can explain it to you. But as an owner, you should be making your own informed decision. And if you need more information to do it, don't be afraid to ask for it. If you need more time to make the decision, don't be afraid to take that time to make that decision.
You can defer decisions.
And similar principles are going to apply to building managers now too. So they've sort of expanded their duties owed to owners in terms of transparency about connections with suppliers, for instance. Same idea. Whole idea is they don't want owners corporations to not be aware where there's a benefit along the line.
Absolutely. And the other thing I see, which really annoys me too, because when we're onboarding new schemes, is a lot of owners think, oh my God, our contract's going to expire. We need to appoint our current agent because we haven't had time to go to the market. Because not every agent is giving that maximum 6 months and minimum 3 months notice that their contract's coming up to an end. So that's another change that came in probably December 24 from memory, or 25, where previously they had to give a minimum 3 months notice. And what some naughty agents, I say, were doing, they were actually giving notice the day after they got appointed, so 3 years in advance, that the owners court would forget 3 years later. So they've now introduced the change and said, well, no, it can't be earlier than 6 months, but no later than 3 months. But what I do see is when some owners corp haven't acted quickly to go out and test the market, or if they're not satisfied, want to get other options, is the agent says, well, no, sorry, you have to enter into a 3-year agreement. I won't consider anything shorter. And I say to a lot of clients, well, no, you can say, I want to extend for 3 months to give me a chance to go to the market, invite you. And then I say to the client, if they're not willing to give you that 3-month extension, then make the decision, move away and go out and get quotes. Even if you have to appoint another agent as an interim basis, you can, obviously if they would agree to a short-term contract. But don't feel that you're forced into a 3-year term, because you don't need to be forced into a 3-year term initially. If you haven't 100%. Done your homework, of course. I mean, obviously long-term contracts are valuable because a managing agent is going to invest in. Correct.
But it's
Strata managers, but Strata managers ultimately take direction from the committee, right? And so I had a plain example, which I have now just escalated, because in fact, the committee had not had an AGM for 2 years. They had been purchased with a Strata role, and the Strata management company was saying to them, well, there's no committee because we haven't had an AGM for 2 years. That is a big no-no for me, right? Because if that committee could sign the contract to appoint a novated contract, they can certainly then be appointed to choose who they're going to have for their insurance company, which this Strata management company did on their behalf. How nice is that?
Wrong. And just so you know, Sam, the committee is elected up until the next annual general meeting. So if they haven't held the AGM for 2 years, that committee still remains.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a clear breach. So I chaired the meeting last night, and and the Strata management company left the room.
And look, that was one of the other changes too. Talking about chair, that was one of the changes that got introduced, where the chairman's now got to facilitate fair and open discussions. It's got to allow discussions from each owner that's in attendance, which I think is really important, because from time to time you'll see in some schemes you've got, dominant owners that unfortunately don't let other owners speak up, and they feel quite timid or bullied. So I think that's really good, and that's important for all the, the chairman and their role to ensure that they are facilitating fair and open discussions.
And it avoids that, I'm just going to put it to a vote, no discussion, go put it to a vote.
Or I've actually had chairs yell at people to shut up. Like, And the strata manager's not actioned anything because they're thinking that chair's going to be the one that signs their contract, right? But at the end of the day, if you're being mistreated in a meeting, that's why you should always ask for the meeting to be recorded, because that's when you can actually go back and make a formal complaint against them if there's been that kind of behaviour.
Yeah, and obviously you need the permission of all those in attendance, and some give consent and some don't, but it is a wise move if they do get that consent, because they can
I agree. So we've got mandatory training coming up. October, it's kind of kick off with fair trading. You know, why are we doing this, Leanne?
I think it's one of the best changes. I really do, because like for me personally, being a Strata manager for 26 years, I really like working with committees that are well informed, because it actually makes my job easier. I'm actually talking to members that understand the rules and obligations. But I think it is to ensure that members are armed with the right information and education to actually be able to fulfil their role to the full capacity of what they are required as committee members. It's making them well informed, which will help them make decisions, but also it's ensuring that, you know, managers or service providers or experts or others, whoever they're dealing with, isn't going to be able to put the wool over their eyes, in my view, because you're going to be well educated and it helps them manage their asset. And that's probably one of the most valuable assets is your home or your property investment. So you want to be able to ensure you're making decisions that are preserving the value of your asset. And I say to a lot of owners, it is an investment whether you live in it or whether it's a true investment, because at the end of the day, you're going to cash in that asset one day. And when you cash it in, you want to be cashing it in with a good return, a good value. And value just doesn't come naturally. Value comes from how much you're investing in it. So I say to a lot of owners that when you're investing in your levies, it's a return. Yes, you're spending money on maintaining carpets, painting, gardens, but you're spending X dollars to hopefully get Y dollars, and we want the Y dollars to be greater than the X. But you can't make a return and not spend. And a lot of owners want return on their investment and apartments, but they don't want to spend money on levies, and they don't understand that levies have to go up too, because as your capital gains and values are going up, your levies will go up as well. So I think training is great. And it's good that they're going to make it free through fair trading. Initially. Yes, initially. I think it's going to be interesting to see the content of the training. I know that, you know, I gave some feedback on what I think training should include, and I really think it should be on their roles, so office bearers' roles and committee, as well as, you know, financial education. So it's important they can read the financials that are being produced by managing agents and ensuring that they can ask the right questions. Understanding the obligations under Section 106, I think, is really important, because then it helps you make the decision when there's a work order in front of you or a quote. And remedial. Remedial is quite big. I mean, recently I was involved in a panel about remedial repairs, and you'd be surprised how much is involved in remedial work. It's not just getting the builder out. There's so much involved, so much risk in getting it right. So I think you know, some education around that is really key. And obviously WHS and safety obligations as well as fire, I think, is really important. So there's some of the key elements that I think would really form a good basis for education for the committee. But we don't want to make it too onerous, because sometimes it's hard to get the hand up to nominate.
It's a balancing idea. You don't want to scare people off. The only other thing I'd probably chuck in is and legislation is hopefully expanded on it, but the Strata Committee's duties as well. So it's something, you know, you do have some people that join with a particular agenda in mind to push their particular goal, but you want them to be taking into account the benefit as much as possible of all of the owners' corporation. So I think something that draws to attention that you know, they do have these, you know, fiduciary obligations effectively, but because of that, they do also benefit from that indemnity from the owners' corporation, as long as their action was done in good faith. So I think that's important to tie in.
Well, when you're on the committee, you're actually there to represent all the owners, not just your own agenda, and that would be also deemed as a conflict of interest. So if you're asking for shade sales on your balcony and that has to be considered, as a voting situation, you need to leave the room, right? You can't stay there. But also from my perspective, like with the Treasury position, you really do need to know your financials and how to read a profit and loss and balance sheet. I had a physicist the other day say to me, I'm good with numbers. Can I read a balance sheet? And I said, well, maybe if you're doing formulas in the chemical lab, but definitely not when you're talking about financial management of your building. So, when you're actually putting up your hand to be on the committee, I believe that you should be actually speaking to the AGM about why you should be elected and what your skill set is that you're bringing. And if you don't have the skill set, that's where this training is helping. And, we are seeing in some states like ACT, they're even suggesting that owners get paid to be on the committee. And I don't think that's a bad thing because, quite frankly, I think that you're actually giving your time. You are volunteers in the end, right? So we agree with Leanne. We think that an hour's worth of training as 6 separate modules of 10 minutes each, which you can then do on the train on the way home, or, once you're kind of like in bed and you would normally read your book for 10 minutes, that's where it has to be really kind of like achievable, accessible, short, smart, and to the point. But it does mean that everybody then is on the same understanding, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's not going to be onerous, like you said, Sam. It's really high-level understanding because at the end of the day, if you've appointed a managing agent, they are executing on your behalf, but you need to give the decision-making, because you're the principal, we're the agent. The principal gives the instructions, the agent executes those instructions. So it's important that you're well-informed to give those instructions. And funny you say that about, setting up and talking about your qualifications. All our managers, when we hold annual general meetings, and especially if we get a lot of nominations, we ask those members to stand up. They've got a 4-minute spiel on who they are, what their background is, and why they think they'll be a good candidate to the committee. And then it allows owners to say, oh, okay, because if you just put a hand up and say, oh, I'm Leanne and I want to nominate, well, no one really knows about Leanne because probably Leanne's not known to those owners.
Yeah.
So it really then helps when people get up, they start speaking, they know their background, and then you find owners are saying, okay, he's a lawyer, he'd be great value. He's actually an accountant, he's great value. He's a project manager, he's an engineer. And then they spread the qualifications, especially based on what their building needs. So if they're going through a defects claim, they're doing remedial upgrade or project upgrade work. So we find that works quite well and helps owners nominate those members that they think will be a good fit for their building.
And that suggestion about potentially paying may help to expand the pool of people who are willing to spend the time. Because a lot of the time it's, it's more a lack of suitable candidates that's the issue. So if you can motivate people to put their hand up, because you're recognizing if you're doing it properly, it can be a considerable commitment time-wise. So
absolutely.
Recognition.
Yeah. And certainly,
especially if you're managed by premium Strata, Sam, with blind copy in our committees on absolutely everything. I'll get a load of emails.
But at the end of the day, you should certainly allow a budget item for the committee to actually go out and have a Christmas lunch or something like that, because they are actually donating a lot of time. And if they do a great job, like, if you're paying that from an external perspective, and I've got to say a word of warning, if they're an engineer, just make sure that they're actually, a construction engineer, not a civil engineer or someone who deals with electrical engineering, because they're very different, right? And a lot of them actually don't know what they're doing when it comes to the apartment building, because it is a specialist trade. But I do think that, as a committee, if you've got a great job done with your committee and they've been diligent, they need to be given some sign of appreciation. I'm a big fan. You attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. And so if you've got an angst against your committee or an angst against a neighbour, do not lose your SHIT. Stay calm, stay collected. Remember that you may need those people's help at some point to do something for yourself. And if you have burnt your bridges, my dear, I have seen people move out of the apartment complex because they have not done that within their mind, right? So we're moving into
helping protect their asset. These committee members are actually putting the time and the hours to protect the owner's assets.
Yeah. And if you think that they can do a better job,
environment.
no one wants hostility. And if you think that you can do a better job, get on the committee. Stop criticizing the committee and get on the committee. And then you may actually understand just how much work they actually are doing.
Yeah.
But the committee needs to be action orientated, not a talk fest. It has to be an action fest.
Yeah.
Right.
And talking about criticism, it's a very good point you raise, Sam, because it's very easy to criticize from the sideline. Yeah. What you see from the sideline is a very different perspective when you're in the heart of it, you're sitting in the middle of it, and you have all the facts. You understand the circumstances in full. So I always say to a lot of owners who sometimes complain about the committee members, I'm saying, but you're not privy to all the facts. And that's why then I go back to the committee and give them some tips and advice is be fully transparent with your owners. Keep them along the way with you. Even though you're the committee making these decisions day to day, you have to make them well informed on what you're doing and why, because then you're likely to get their support. But if they don't know why, they don't know how, and they don't know when, they're likely to criticise what you are doing because they're kept in the dark. So it's a two-way for me. It's the committee communicating what they're doing for the owners to see value in their contribution as well.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
100%.
All right, so we're about to finish up. Any last words of advice to our committees and our apartment owners about what they should be thinking about as we move forward with all these legislative changes that have occurred?
Look, for me, I think it is stay on top of it because a lot is happening. The change is happening very rapid. And I think, platforms like, Sam, your platform is very, very helpful. And I think it's important to ensure that you're on top of these changes as they come in, to ensure that you're meeting your obligations. And work as a community. I say this to a lot of owners, like I said, you might not be happy with every decision. Pick your battles. There are some worth having a battle over, and there's some that just let them go. Like a marriage, you're not going to win everything. So you've got to give up something. So I do really say community living is like a marriage because you are glued to one another, and you've got to live in harmony because I see a lot of schemes fall down because their effort and energy goes into arguing rather than energy and effort working together to get the best outcome. So that's what I would leave viewers with. And I think, there's a lot happening, so stay tuned.
Good advice. Paul?
Springboarding off Leanne was saying, the legislative changes, they shouldn't come as a surprise for the most part when they do actually get put in, because a lot of it is telegraphed. Fair Trading's put a lot of effort into their resources and websites to inform you in fairly straightforward language about what's coming in and when it's coming in. I will say that the upcoming changes that are sort of in the works, they're coming out of the 5-year consultation on the Strata Schemes Management Act. So a lot of it is them taking the feedback and now implementing it. So it's one of those things where if you didn't get your thing dealt with this time, take the opportunity next time around. They're always reconsidering or amending because you never know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So obviously it's a good opportunity to get on board with that.
I agree. Speak now or forever hold your peace. So I had a lot owner contact me the other day complaining about the fact that her neighbour's cat was going into her front yard and what could I do about that? And I said, tolerate it. Right. So at the end of the day, like you said, Leanne, pick your battles.
Yeah. So
pick your battles, right? Because you never know when you might need that neighbour to come around and actually help you if you've had an accident or you need to use their shower because your bathroom's out, or you might just need a cup of sugar, right?
And you still have that problem, Sam, if you're in a freestanding house and you have the neighbouring house cat come into your property. Yeah. So for me, they're type of things that you have to tolerate because you're in a community, whether it's a community of a strata scheme or a community in a neighbourhood.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it's, you're investing in your neighborhood, really, because at the end of the day, you're living there or, it's your investment, you're looking to get a return and you want to have a good environment. So at the end of the day, as you said before, more bees with honey.
And can you imagine a prospective purchaser coming in to do a strata search and seeing all the politics on
the train wrecks? Yes, the red flags.
So remember that investment as well.
Your email will be a book and record.
Absolutely. I say that to a lot of owners. Tolerate it, suck it up, for that return as well, where you can, of course. So,
is it red, orange, or green? Correct, right? That's the cat is definitely a green.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul and Leanne, for your time today. I've enjoyed this conversation. You've imparted a lot of information, which I think our viewers are going to really appreciate. So again, Paul Wiseman for Bannermans Lawyers and Leanne Habib from Premium Strata, thank you for your time today. It is very greatly appreciated.
Thank you,
Thanks, Leanne.
and thanks everyone.